My own daughter, the child I raised, and her husband, the man I welcomed into our family, told me they wanted to take me out for a drive so we could clear the air. I trusted them. I got into the car, and I sat there believing maybe they finally wanted to talk things through. Instead, they drove me miles away from everything, deep into the desert, where there was nothing but dirt, sand, and silence. They stopped the car, told me to get out, and before I even had time to ask what was happening, they slammed the door shut. Kevin rolled down the window, looked me in the eye, and said, "Good luck getting back." Then they sped off, leaving me standing there under the burning sun with no water, no phone, and no way home. What they never expected was that I would survive, that I would keep walking step after step until I found help, and that their cruel plan to get rid of me would end up being the biggest mistake of their lives. Before we continue with this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video, because when you stop doing this, YouTube understands that you don't like this content and stops recommending good stories like this. Oh, and don't forget to comment below where you're watching us from. We love to know that. Victoria started talking to me a few days after Robert's funeral, and from the very beginning, I felt like something was different in her tone. She wasn't openly rude, but her words carried a weight that made me feel uneasy. She sat across from me in the living room, hands neatly folded on her lap, and said, "Mom, you can't stay in this big house all alone. It's not safe." At first, I thought she was worried about me, that she wanted to help me through my grief, but soon her comments started coming more often. Every conversation circled back to the idea that living alone was not an option for me anymore. I was still getting used to the silence of the house without Robert, and the idea of giving up my home so soon after his death made me feel like I was losing him all over again. I nodded politely, but inside I wanted to scream that I could handle myself, that I wasn't helpless. Still, I didn't argue. I just listened and felt smaller each day. I didn't realize it at that moment, but Victoria wasn't just expressing concern. She was preparing me for something I wasn't ready to face. As the days passed, I began noticing how little my life had ever really been about me. When Robert was alive, everything revolved around him. His work, his hobbies, his friends. He always came first, and I had learned to stay in the background. Even when Victoria was growing up, I was the one who made sure her needs were met, her clothes clean, her meals ready, her school activities supported. People would praise Robert for being so charming, or Victoria for being so bright, and I was just his wife, or her mother. Nobody ever really asked me what I wanted or how I felt. I kept the house running, I kept everything in order, and somehow that meant I was invisible. Now, after Robert's death, I thought maybe I'd finally get a chance to be myself, to decide how to live. But Victoria's pressure made me realize I might not get that freedom. Instead of gaining control over my own life, I felt like I was being pushed into another role I didn't ask for, one that left me with even less dignity than before. Victoria didn't act alone. Kevin, my son-in-law, joined in soon after. He had this way of talking that sounded polite on the surface, but I could feel the judgment underneath. One evening, they both sat me down at the kitchen table, almost like it was an intervention. Kevin spread out some pamphlets in front of me, brochures of retirement homes, each one showing smiling older people playing cards or walking in gardens. "These places are really nice, Margaret," he said, as if he was doing me a favor. Victoria chimed in, "Mom, you deserve comfort and safety. You don't need the stress of looking after this house anymore." I stared at the glossy pictures of strangers in places that didn't feel like home, and my chest tightened. They spoke as though I was already incapable, as though my life here meant nothing anymore. I wanted to tell them that I still cooked my own meals, still cleaned, still managed fine. But every time I tried to speak, they interrupted, their voices smooth, convincing, rehearsed. I sat there, trapped, wondering how long they had been planning this together. What made it worse was the way they pretended to care. They used phrases like, "We're only thinking of you," and "You'll thank us later." But behind their words, I sensed something colder. They didn't want the responsibility of checking on me, of worrying whether I'd fall or get sick alone. I was becoming a problem they wanted to solve, a task they wanted off their shoulders. It stung, especially coming from Victoria, because I had sacrificed so much for her. I remembered staying up all night when she had fevers as a child, sewing her dresses for school plays, cheering her on at every small victory. And now, instead of love, I felt like I was being managed, like I was some kind of burden. The hardest part was that they never shouted or said anything cruel directly. They wrapped their push in sugar, always smiling, always pretending it was for my own good. But the more they smiled, the more I felt the walls closing in. I tried to resist in small ways. I would change the subject when they brought up the brochures. I'd tell them I wasn't ready, that I needed time to grieve, that this house was full of memories I wasn't ready to leave behind. Sometimes I even convinced myself that if I stood firm enough, they would back down. But they didn't. They always found a way to circle back, to remind me of my age, of my fragility. Kevin made comments about how the stairs were dangerous for me. Victoria pointed out how big the house was and how lonely I must be in it. They chipped away at me little by little until I started to doubt myself. Maybe they were right. Maybe I wasn't strong enough. Maybe I couldn't manage here alone. Their voices became louder than my own thoughts, and soon I began to believe them. It felt like they were taking pieces of my confidence each day, leaving me weaker than I had ever felt before. The turning point came one afternoon when Victoria showed up with a folder already filled out. She had circled a few options in the brochures and said, "Mom, we've been talking about this for weeks. It's time to decide." Kevin nodded beside her, like this was some kind of final step in a plan I had never agreed to. I wanted to shout, to slam the folder shut and throw it out, but I didn't. I just sat there in silence, my hands trembling. I realized then that this wasn't really a choice. They had already made it for me. My grief, my silence, my years of invisibility, all of it had built up to this moment where I was treated like I had no say in my own life. Victoria and Kevin smiled as if they had achieved something good, but inside I felt crushed. The house that had been my world, the place where I raised a family and gave everything I had, was slipping away from me. By the end, it didn't feel like persuasion anymore. It felt like being pushed out of my own life. Victoria and Kevin framed it as care, but I could see through it. They didn't want me here. They didn't want the weight of me on their lives. All those years I spent making sure everyone else was happy, I had assumed that when I needed them, they would be there for me. Instead, I was being erased. My grief over Robert was already unbearable, but now it was mixed with the sharp pain of betrayal. I wasn't moving into a home because I wanted to. I was being forced out because my own daughter and her husband had decided I was no longer worth the space I took up. And so, in the quiet of that same house I had devoted my life to, I realized the truth. I wasn't just losing Robert. I was being expelled, cruelly, from the life I thought I still had. 6 weeks after Robert's death, Victoria showed up at the house without warning. I was in the kitchen, trying to make some tea, when I heard the front door slam. She walked in, dragging 2 big suitcases behind her, her face set in a way that told me she wasn't here for a casual visit. Before I could even ask what she was doing, she dropped the bags in the hallway and announced, "According to the will, everything belongs to me now." Her voice was cold, without any hesitation. I froze, holding the teacup in my hand, trying to understand what she had just said. I asked her what she meant, and she repeated it, slower this time, as if I were a child. "Dad left everything to me. The house, the accounts, everything. You don't have any claim." My chest tightened, and I felt like the floor had given way under me. For years I had believed this house, the life I had built with Robert, was part mine too. But in that moment, Victoria was looking at me not as her mother, but as an intruder she wanted out. The words came sharp and fast, and I could barely breathe as I realized what she was doing. She didn't stop there. Once she claimed the house was hers, she started tearing me down in ways I never thought my own daughter could. "You're useless, Mom," she said flatly, as if it were just a fact. "You can't live here anymore. This isn't your home." The way she said it, so direct, made me feel smaller than I had ever felt in my life. I tried to protest, to remind her of everything I had done for her growing up, but she brushed it off like none of it mattered. She told me she didn't need me around, that I was just in the way, and that it was time for me to accept reality. My hands shook as I tried to gather myself, but she was relentless. She acted like I was some stranger squatting in her property, not the woman who had carried her, fed her, and given her everything I could. That afternoon, my whole life seemed to shrink. My home, my family, my identity, it all felt ripped away in a few cruel sentences. I stood there, numb, as Victoria made it clear she didn't see me as her mother anymore, only as a problem to get rid of. When it came down to what I could take, She allowed me almost nothing. Victoria gave me 2 old suitcases and told me to only pack what's necessary. I walked slowly through the house I had cleaned and cared for over decades, and had to choose what little pieces of my life I could fit into those bags. I picked a few clothes, my wedding photo with Robert, and some small family pictures I couldn't bear to leave behind. Everything else, she said, belongs to me now. My heart broke with each step I took, touching objects I had once cherished but now had to abandon. After all those years of putting others first, I was being sent away with almost nothing to show for it. When I was finished, I stood at the doorway with just those 2 bags, feeling stripped of everything I had built. Victoria didn't even look at me. She tossed $200 onto the table like it was some kind of favor and told me to find a place to stay. It wasn't enough for rent, not even close. It was barely enough for survival. I stared at that money, feeling humiliated, like I was worth less than the furniture she was keeping. She didn't drive me somewhere decent either. She dropped me off at a rundown motel on the edge of town, the kind of place where the walls smelled like cigarettes and the carpets were stained. I stood outside the room she had paid for, holding my bags and wondering how my life had come to this. The bed inside was small and lumpy, the curtains thin and dirty, and the bathroom sink dripped constantly. Sitting on the edge of that bed, I couldn't hold back my tears anymore. I cried until my chest hurt, thinking of the years I had spent caring for Victoria and Robert, believing I was part of a family, believing my place was secure. Now I was sitting in a cheap motel room, treated like an inconvenience, like a stranger no one wanted. Every sound outside, the cars passing, people laughing in the parking lot, reminded me I was alone. For the first time in my life, I truly felt abandoned. And the hardest part wasn't the room or the money or even the loss of the house. It was the feeling that my own daughter had looked me in the eye and decided I was nothing. As I sat there in that lonely room, I couldn't stop replaying my life in my head. I thought about the years with Robert, all the moments I stood by him, the sacrifices I made, the way I pushed aside my own dreams to make sure the family had everything they needed. I remembered long nights caring for Victoria when she was sick, the holidays I cooked and decorated for, the endless hours keeping the house together while Robert was at work or out with friends. I gave everything I had to that family, and yet here I was, discarded like I had never mattered. It was almost too much to believe, but the part that kept me awake that night was the question of Robert. Would he really have left me with nothing? The man I had shared decades with, was it possible he wrote me out of his will? Or had Victoria twisted things to her advantage? The doubt gnawed at me. I felt betrayed by him too, but something inside told me this wasn't the full truth. I couldn't accept that Robert had abandoned me this way. There had to be something more, something hidden. That thought gave me strength. The more I turned it over in my mind, the more convinced I became that something was wrong. Robert had his flaws, but I knew him well enough to believe he wouldn't have left me helpless on purpose. Victoria's behavior was too cruel, too fast, too rehearsed. It didn't feel right. Lying in that motel bed, staring at the ceiling, I realized I couldn't just give up. If I did, I'd be living out my days in misery, powerless and forgotten. I wiped my tears and sat up, and for the first time since Robert's death, I felt a spark inside me. I decided I would visit Robert's old lawyer, the one who had handled his business for years. Maybe he could tell me what was really in that will. Maybe he could help me understand what had happened. I didn't have much. Just 2 bags, a few photos, and a little cash, but I had one thing left: determination. And in that moment, I knew I had to fight, because if I didn't, no one else would fight for me. I walked into Harrison Fitzgerald's office, nervous and unsure of what I would hear. The building was quiet, and his office smelled faintly of old books and polished wood. I sat down across from him, clutching my purse tightly in my lap. I told him about what Victoria had said, that Robert had left everything to her, leaving me with nothing. Harrison frowned, leaning back in his chair, and shook his head slowly. He opened a thick folder with Robert's name on it, pulled out several documents, and adjusted his glasses. "That is not correct, Margaret," he said firmly. He slid the will across the desk toward me and pointed at the details. My hands trembled as I read. The paper was clear. Robert had left me the house and 70% of his assets. My breath caught when Harrison explained that this was worth about $23 million. I blinked several times, almost in disbelief, feeling a mix of confusion and relief. Then Harrison went on, saying that Victoria had been left 10 million, but only under one condition. She had to treat me with respect. My chest tightened. She had not only lied, she had disqualified herself. Harrison's voice was calm but serious as he continued to explain what the documents meant. Victoria's behavior makes her ineligible to receive what Robert left for her. By law, her share is forfeited and transferred to you. I stared at him, not fully able to process it. Victoria had told me I was useless, had thrown me out with barely $200, and here I was hearing the opposite. Robert had trusted me, valued me, and made sure I was protected. The anger inside me burned as I realized what Victoria had done. She hadn't just lied, she had committed fraud. She had tried to erase me and take everything for herself, knowing it wasn't hers. I clenched my hands together tightly, remembering every cruel word she had thrown at me. Harrison explained that what she did could be considered abuse against an elderly person, and possibly even a crime. My mind swirled with emotions, betrayal, shock, relief, but underneath all of it, there was a new strength growing. I thought back to those weeks in the motel, sitting on that awful bed, crying into the night, believing that Robert had abandoned me. I remembered the way Victoria had looked at me, so sure of herself, so confident in her lies. She had taken advantage of my grief, my silence, and my trust. Now, I finally had proof that she was wrong. Robert hadn't left me with nothing. In fact, he had given me far more than I ever expected. The house was mine, not hers. The bulk of his fortune was mine as well. The 10 million meant for her was now legally mine too. The irony was almost unbearable. She had tried to strip me of everything, but in the end, she had stripped herself. For the first time since Robert's death, I felt a weight lift off my chest. I had not been forgotten. I had not been abandoned. Instead, I had been protected in a way I couldn't see until now. My tears this time weren't from despair. They were from relief, mixed with the spark of anger that pushed me to stand taller. Harrison kept talking, laying out the next steps. He said we would need to review the possibility of fraud charges because the fact that Victoria lied so directly, even showing up with supposed proof, was a clear sign of manipulation. He asked me to think carefully about what I wanted to do with this information. "This is your decision now, Margaret," he told me. "You have the power here." Those words echoed in my mind. For so many years, I had been the quiet one, the background figure, the woman who kept the family going without thanks. Now, suddenly, I was the one in control. The legal papers in front of me confirmed it. Victoria could no longer push me aside. Kevin could no longer smirk at me while handing me pamphlets for nursing homes. This was my life, my inheritance, and my chance to finally be seen. I looked down at the signature Robert had left at the bottom of the will. For the first time in weeks, I smiled. He hadn't betrayed me. He had trusted me to carry on, and that meant more than words could express. The more Harrison explained, the more I realized how serious Victoria's actions had been. She hadn't just lied out of spite. She had forged her entire story, knowing full well what the will said. Harrison pointed out that there could have been attempts at falsifying documents, since the story she gave me didn't match the official paperwork. It hit me then. If I hadn't walked into Harrison's office, I might have lived the rest of my life believing Victoria's lies, scraping by on nothing while she lived off what was never hers. My body shook at the thought, but now I had proof, and I had the law on my side. Harrison assured me that we could pursue this legally, and that there were protections in place for people in situations like mine. I nodded, tears still in my eyes, but this time they were tears of determination. The fear I had carried was fading, and in its place grew something stronger. For once, I wasn't powerless. I wasn't invisible. When I finally left Harrison's office that day, I walked out differently than when I had walked in. I had come in broken, unsure, and afraid of what I would hear. I had expected to be told I had nothing, that Victoria was right. Instead, I walked out knowing that I had everything, more than I ever imagined. I wasn't just holding on to scraps of my life anymore. I was holding power, real power, for the first time. The inheritance, the house, the security. It was all mine, and it was legally protected. Victoria's lies had backfired, and I no longer needed to live in her shadow. I felt anger toward her, yes, but also a deep sense of clarity. She had underestimated me. She had thought I would stay quiet forever. But now I saw myself differently. I wasn't the background character anymore. I wasn't just the wife or the mother. I was Margaret Sullivan, and for the first time, I understood what it meant to stand in my own strength. I left Harrison's office with my head high, knowing that this was only the beginning of a new chapter, one where I finally had the power in my hands. Harrison wasted no time once everything was clear about the will. He called it Operation Justice, and from the way he spoke, I could tell he meant business. I sat in his office as he picked up the phone and made one call after another, his tone sharp and commanding. He spoke with the police, with bank representatives, and even arranged for a private investigator to start digging into what Victoria had done. I watched him take control of the situation, and for the first time, I felt like someone was fighting for me instead of against me. He explained each step in simple terms so I could follow. The banks would freeze her accounts. Her credit cards would be canceled. Any services she enjoyed, utilities, subscriptions, even her personal assistants, would be disrupted immediately. The police would be notified of her attempts at fraud, and the investigator would pull together the evidence of her manipulation and lies. It was happening so fast, and I almost couldn't believe it. For weeks I had been powerless, tossed aside like trash. Now, within hours, the tables were turning, and everything Victoria thought she controlled was slipping through her fingers. I sat quietly, my hands folded, absorbing every detail. Not long after Harrison began the process, I received a phone call. The screen lit up with Victoria's name, and for a moment, I hesitated. My first instinct was to ignore it, to let her stew in the chaos that was surely hitting her. But something inside me told me to answer, so I did. The voice on the other end was nothing like the confident, cold woman who had thrown me out of my own home. She sounded panicked, her words coming out fast and uneven. "Mom, listen. Something's wrong with the bank. My cards aren't working, and I can't access my accounts. This must be some mistake." I didn't say anything at first, letting her fill the silence. She kept talking, trying to sound sweet, like the daughter I once remembered. "Mom, you know I didn't mean those things I said. You know I love you. Please, can we just talk about this?" Her desperation was obvious, and she was scrambling to find a way back into my good graces. A part of me, the old me, wanted to believe her, but another part knew better. This was manipulation, nothing else. When I finally spoke, my voice was calm but firm, nothing like the trembling tone I had used before. "Victoria, stop pretending. I know the truth. I know about the will. I know about the lies. You tried to take everything from me, but you failed." There was silence on her end for a moment, and then she tried again, her voice cracking this time. "No, Mom, it's not like that. I was just confused. I didn't mean—" I cut her off. "Don't lie to me again. Robert left me the house and most of the assets. You were given $10 million, but you lost even that because of the way you treated me. Everything is mine now. You brought this on yourself." The words came out steady, and for the first time in years, I felt in control of the conversation. I wasn't the weak woman begging to be heard anymore. I was telling her exactly how things were, and she had no choice but to listen. The silence that followed was louder than anything she could have said. Then came the sound of her shock. She gasped, stumbling over her words, asking how I could know, who told me, and what I planned to do. I didn't answer all her questions. Instead, I repeated what Harrison had said earlier. Fraud, forgery, elder abuse. Those are crimes, Victoria. The authorities are involved now. She broke down on the phone, her tone shifting between anger and pleading. One moment she was blaming me, saying I had ruined her life, and the next she was begging me not to let this happen. I listened, but I didn't feel the pull to forgive her like I once might have. The weight of all those nights in the motel, all the cruel words, all the lies, they were heavier than her tears. I stayed strong, and I told her flatly, "This isn't my doing. You did this to yourself. I'm not your victim anymore." Saying those words gave me a strength I didn't know I had. By that evening, the calls from Harrison confirmed everything was moving quickly. Victoria's accounts were locked. Her credit cards had been canceled, leaving her unable to spend a dime. The investigator uncovered proof that she had attempted to tamper with documents, and the police were already reviewing the case. Everything she thought she had, the house, the money, the lifestyle, was gone. Harrison explained that within hours, The legal system would recognize me as the rightful heir of everything Robert had left, with Victoria having no claim. The thought of it almost felt surreal. Just weeks ago, I had been crying in a cheap motel, clutching 2 bags and wondering how I would survive. Now my daughter, who had mocked me and called me useless, was the one scrambling, watching her life collapse in front of her. The contrast was almost unbelievable. As I sat in the quiet of my motel room that night, I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time: control. I wasn't broken anymore. I wasn't waiting for someone else to decide my fate. For the first time, I held the power, and Victoria knew it. Her world of luxury and arrogance was crumbling fast, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. I thought of the years I had spent being silent, doing what was expected, letting others take the spotlight while I stayed in the shadows. That version of me was gone. Harrison had started Operation Justice, but it wasn't just about the money or the house. It was about me standing up for myself at last. And as the news of Victoria's downfall reached me in bits and pieces, I knew one thing for certain. I was finally ready to watch her fall. The day I learned that Victoria and Kevin had been arrested, it felt almost unreal. Harrison called me in the morning, his tone steady, telling me the police had finally acted. Fraud and forgery, those were the charges. My daughter and her husband, once so sure of themselves, were now behind bars. I sat quietly for a while after hanging up, letting the news sink in. A part of me felt relief so deep that I almost couldn't breathe. Another part of me felt sadness, because no matter what she had done, Victoria was still my child. But there was no denying the truth. She had crossed a line, and she had to face the consequences. Later, when I turned on the television, I even saw their names scroll across the bottom of the screen. Reporters talking about financial crimes and abuse. Seeing Victoria's picture there, looking so different without her arrogance, sent a strange chill through me. For years I had lived as though my voice didn't matter, as though I had no control. Now the world was finally seeing what had happened, and the people who tried to destroy me were the ones being destroyed. It was justice, even if it was painful. Going back to the house was another emotional moment for me. For weeks, I had avoided even thinking about walking through that front door again. I thought it would crush me with memories of Robert, reminding me of what I had lost. But when Harrison handed me the keys and I stepped inside, something had changed. Yes, I saw the reminders of Robert everywhere. The armchair he always sat in, the table where we ate together, the pictures on the walls. But it no longer felt like a memorial I had to live inside of. Instead, I felt like the house was mine, in a way it had never been before. For years, it had been Robert's home, or Victoria's playground, and I had simply kept it running. Now, I looked around and realized it could finally be mine. I didn't have to keep it frozen in time. I could make changes, big or small, that reflected who I was and what I wanted. That thought gave me a spark of excitement I hadn't felt in decades. I started planning almost right away. The kitchen, which had always been designed around Robert's preferences, was the first place I wanted to change. I thought about brighter colors, modern appliances, maybe even knocking down a wall to open the space up. In the living room, I imagined moving out the heavy furniture Robert had insisted on and replacing it with pieces that felt lighter, more comfortable for me. Victoria's old room, which had been left untouched for years, I planned to clear out completely. That space could finally become something I wanted, maybe a small library or a sewing room. For the first time, I allowed myself to dream about my home in terms of my own comfort. It felt strange at first, almost selfish, but then I reminded myself that I had earned it. I had given up so much of myself for others, and now it was my turn. As I stood in each room, I imagined not just changes to the furniture or the paint, but changes to the feeling of the house itself. It was no longer a place where I existed in the background. It was a place where I could finally live as myself. The attention from the media came faster than I expected. Word of Victoria's arrest spread quickly, and soon enough reporters were calling, leaving messages, even waiting outside the gate. They wanted interviews, photographs, and comments. They called it an important case, something that exposed the reality of financial abuse against elderly people. At first, the idea of talking about what happened made me nervous. I wasn't used to speaking publicly, and I didn't want to become some kind of spectacle. But at the same time, I thought about all the people out there who might be going through something similar, people who were scared and silenced the way I had been. Maybe my story could help them see that they weren't alone and that they didn't have to stay quiet. The thought scared me, but it also gave me purpose. Harrison advised me to be cautious, to think carefully before saying anything. Still, the idea of turning my pain into something bigger, something that could help others, stayed with me. For so long I had been silent, and maybe now it was time to use my voice. Meanwhile, the reality of Victoria's situation became clearer with each passing day. She wasn't out on bail, and the report said both she and Kevin were being kept in custody. The arrogance she once carried, the entitlement that made her treat me like I was nothing, had been stripped away. I thought about her sitting in a cell, facing the consequences of everything she had done. A part of me grieved for the daughter I once had, the little girl I raised and loved. But another part of me knew this was the only way she might ever truly understand the damage she had caused. Watching her arrogance collapse wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I wasn't celebrating her downfall, but I also wasn't going to deny the justice in it. For too long, she had used her power against me. Now she had none, and as painful as it was, I accepted that this was her path now, not mine. As I settled back into my home, I knew I was standing at the start of something new. The pain of the past months was still there, but it no longer controlled me. The house, once filled with shadows of Robert and the weight of Victoria's cruelty, was now opening up into a space where I could finally breathe. I had survived betrayal, manipulation, and loss, but I had also found a strength in myself I never thought existed. The media kept calling, and I kept thinking about whether I was ready to speak out, ready to share my story with the world. Maybe I wasn't ready just yet, but I knew I was closer than I had ever been. I looked around at the rooms I would soon transform, at the keys in my hand, and at the silence that was now comforting instead of crushing. And in that moment, I told myself the truth. This was my life now, and for the first time, it was truly mine to shape. Victoria showed up at my door not long after she was released on bail. I wasn't expecting her, and when I saw her standing there, my first reaction was shock. Her usual confidence was gone. She wasn't dressed in her polished clothes, and her hair looked messy, her face pale and tired. She carried herself like someone who had been broken down, and for a moment, I just stood there staring at her. "Mom, please, I need to talk to you," she said, her voice shaky. I didn't want to let her in at first, but part of me wanted to hear what she had to say. I opened the door slowly and stepped aside. She walked in, clutching her bag like it was the only thing she had left. She sat down on the couch, looked at me with teary eyes, and whispered, "I'm sorry. I need your forgiveness." It was strange hearing her speak like that, because for so long her words had been sharp and cruel. Now she was begging, her voice trembling with desperation. But I knew better than to be swept away by her sudden softness. I stayed standing, keeping a distance, reminding myself of everything she had done. I looked at her sitting there, and I felt the weight of all the lies she had told me before. She had tricked me into thinking Robert had left me nothing, had thrown me out of my own home, had called me useless. Now she sat there acting like the same daughter I used to know. But I couldn't forget the truth. I told her there was something she needed to hear, something Robert had left behind. Her face changed instantly, like she was curious but also afraid. I walked over to the drawer where I kept the old USB drive Harrison had given me. Robert had recorded a video before he died, and I hadn't shown it to her until now. I turned on the laptop, opened the file, and let his face appear on the screen. As soon as his voice filled the room, my heart tightened. Robert spoke calmly but firmly, explaining that he had seen the selfishness in Victoria, that he feared her arrogance, and that was why he changed the will, to make sure I was protected. He said he trusted me and wanted me to have control because he knew she might not respect me otherwise. Victoria froze, staring at the screen, her mouth slightly open. As Robert's words continued, she lowered her head and started to cry. Not the fake dramatic tears I had seen from her so many times before, but real ones. Her shoulders shook, and she covered her face with her hands. She heard her father's voice telling her he knew she might betray me, and it broke her. I watched her crumble in front of me, something I never thought I would see. She whispered, "I didn't know. I didn't think he..." But her words trailed off. For once, she had no defense, no clever answer, no excuses that could erase what she had done. I sat across from her, my arms folded, and let the silence stretch between us. This was the moment she had to face who she really was. She wasn't in control anymore, and she knew it. Seeing her break like that brought me no joy, but it brought me clarity. After the video ended, she tried to recover, wiping her face and looking at me with pleading eyes. "Mom, please," she said, her voice hoarse. "Think about the kids. They need me. They need their grandmother too. Don't cut me out completely. Don't let them suffer because of my mistakes." Her words came quickly, desperate, as if the thought of her children might soften me. She was trying to shift the weight of her actions, to use her role as a mother as a shield. For a moment, my heart ached because I did love my grandchildren, and the thought of them growing up without stability hurt me. But I also knew what she was doing. She had always used guilt and pressure to get her way, and this was no different. I looked her in the eye and said, "This isn't about them. This is about you. Don't use them to hide from the truth." She fell quiet, her tears drying, her eyes red and swollen. I told her clearly, "You need to own what you did. No excuses, no justifications. You lied. You tried to steal. You hurt me more than I ever thought my own daughter could. And now you have to live with that." My voice didn't shake. I didn't feel small anymore. I felt strong, steady, and clear. For years, she had made me feel like I didn't matter. But now it was her turn to sit and listen while I spoke the truth. She opened her mouth once, maybe to argue, but then stopped. She knew there was nothing she could say. For the first time in her life, she had to face me as the woman I had become. Not the submissive mother she could walk over, but someone who had taken back her dignity. Victoria looked at me differently then. Her tears slowed, and I could see in her eyes that she finally understood. She wasn't just looking at her mother anymore. She was looking at a woman who had survived betrayal, manipulation, and lies, and had come out stronger. For the first time, she saw me as someone independent, someone who could stand on her own. She saw that I wasn't going to allow her abuse to continue. I wasn't going to bend to her manipulation, and I wasn't going to let her guilt me into forgiveness until she truly admitted her wrongs. Sitting there, across from her, I realized this was a turning point. Whether or not she changed, whether or not she ever became the daughter I once knew, I had finally changed. I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't weak. I was Margaret Sullivan, and I wasn't going to let anyone, not even my own child, erase me again. 3 days after my last encounter with Victoria, I got an unexpected visitor. When I opened the front door, there stood Eleanor Hayes, Kevin's mother. I recognized her immediately from the few family gatherings I had attended years ago. She was dressed in expensive clothes, her jewelry shining even in the daylight, and she carried herself with an air of superiority. She didn't waste time on greetings or pleasantries. She walked right past me into the living room and sat down as if she owned the place. "Margaret," she said, crossing her legs and adjusting her blazer, "we need to settle this mess. Kevin doesn't belong in prison. This has all gone too far." I stood there, still holding the door, unsure what she was really after. Within minutes, she laid it all out. She said she was willing to offer me several $1,000,000 in exchange for dropping everything against Kevin. She called the fraud and forgery a misunderstanding, like it was nothing serious, nothing worth ruining lives over. Her tone was calm, but underneath it I heard the arrogance loud and clear. She wasn't here to apologize. She was here to buy her son's way out. I listened quietly, trying to control my emotions. For years I had been underestimated, pushed aside, treated like I had no say. But now I wasn't that woman anymore. I looked her straight in the eye and told her no. "Your son and my daughter committed crimes," I said firmly. "This is not something money can erase." Eleanor's expression hardened immediately. She leaned forward, her voice dropping, almost like a threat. "Be careful, Margaret. If you keep pushing this, things will come out about Robert that you won't want anyone to know. Are you ready for that?" The words hit me like a slap. For a second, I thought I had misheard her. Robert? My Robert? What could she possibly mean? I tried to stay calm, but my stomach twisted. She smirked when she saw my hesitation, as if she had struck the nerve she wanted. She stood up, smoothed her jacket, and walked toward the door. "Think about it," she said coldly. "Sometimes it's better to let the past stay buried." Then she left, leaving me shaken and filled with questions I never thought I'd have to ask. For the rest of the day, I couldn't stop thinking about what she had said. Robert had been my husband for decades. I thought I knew him better than anyone. Sure, He wasn't perfect. He could be distant, controlling, and sometimes dismissive, but he wasn't a criminal. At least that's what I believed. But Eleanor's words echoed in my mind, and I couldn't shake the feeling that there might be something behind them. I went into Robert's old office, a room I had barely touched since his death, and sat down at his desk. His files and papers were still stacked neatly in drawers and cabinets, just as he had left them. I started going through them, not even sure what I was looking for. At first, it was just boring business documents, contracts, bank statements, receipts. But then I noticed a locked drawer I had never opened. After searching through the desk, I finally found the small key taped under the drawer itself. My hands shook as I opened it, pulling out a set of thick folders filled with financial records I had never seen before. Something about the numbers didn't look right, and I felt a knot forming in my chest. I called Harrison right away and explained what I had found. He agreed that it looked suspicious and suggested bringing in a private investigator to go through everything in detail. I agreed, knowing I couldn't handle this on my own. Within a couple of days, the investigator, a sharp woman named Claire, came to my house and started reviewing the documents carefully. She was patient with me, explaining things step by step, but the more she uncovered, the worse it got. Robert had been funneling money through shell companies, moving funds in ways that didn't add up. Claire traced the accounts and explained that this kind of setup wasn't just shady, it was criminal. She told me it looked like Robert had been laundering money for organizations connected to crime groups for more than 10 years. I sat there, my head spinning, listening to her outline what my husband had been doing behind my back. Each word cut deeper, and I felt like the floor was falling out from under me. The betrayal hit me harder than anything Victoria had ever done. This wasn't just about lies or manipulation. This was my husband, the man I had shared my life with, the man I had trusted more than anyone. I thought about all the times I had defended him, all the times I had put my own needs aside to make sure his world ran smoothly. And all that time, he had been hiding a double life from me. I felt sick as I realized that the wealth, the security, even the house I stood in, might have been built on dirty money. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about everything we had created together being tainted by crime. I thought about the inheritance, the millions left in my name, and instead of feeling secure, I felt terrified. If this came to light, it could all be taken away. Worse, I could be dragged into it, judged for something I had never even known about. My hands trembled as I closed the files, tears running down my face. That night, I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. My mind kept replaying everything Claire had said, everything I had seen in those documents. Robert had lived a life I never knew about, and now I was the one left to deal with the fallout. The love I had felt for him was tangled up with anger and betrayal, and I didn't know how to separate them. Eleanor's threat wasn't just a bluff. She had known the truth, and she had dangled it in front of me like a weapon. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how dangerous this was. If Robert's crimes were exposed, everything I had inherited could be at risk. My future, my independence, my fight to finally stand on my own. It could all collapse. I had survived betrayal from my daughter, but this was different. This was the man I had loved and trusted above all else, and now I had to face the painful truth. Robert wasn't the man I thought he was. He had been living a double life, and the consequences of his choices were now mine to bear. The truth hit me harder than I ever expected. The files Claire uncovered made everything clear. The money that had sustained my family for years, the money Robert left in his will, wasn't clean. It was tied to illegal operations, hidden through layers of companies and accounts I never even knew existed. Sitting at the table with those papers spread out in front of me, I felt like my whole life had been built on lies. The home I cared for, the savings I thought were a safety net, even the inheritance that gave me back my sense of power, it was all stained. I thought about the dinners we shared, the trips we took, the security we had, and suddenly every memory felt different. Robert had paid for those moments with dirty money. What made it worse was knowing that Victoria and Kevin now had leverage. They knew about the fraud, and they could use it to bargain their way out of consequences. For the first time, I understood how dangerous this all was. I wasn't just fighting for dignity anymore. I was standing in the middle of a storm that could ruin me too. Not long after, Victoria showed up again, this time acting like she held the winning card. She walked in with a false calm, the kind of confidence she had when she thought she was untouchable. "Mom," she began, her tone smooth, "the FBI is willing to make a deal. Immunity in exchange for testimony. Kevin and I can expose everything about Dad's illegal dealings. But you'd need to cooperate." She said it like she was doing me a favor, like she was giving me a lifeline. Then she added the part that made my stomach twist. "You'll still be left with $5 million. That's enough for you, isn't it? More than enough for someone your age." I stared at her, barely believing what I was hearing. She wasn't ashamed or apologetic. She was calculating. She was trying to turn Robert's crimes into her escape route, using me as part of the bargain. The idea that she thought I would quietly accept scraps of what was mine after everything made me furious. I told her no. My voice was firm, stronger than I thought it could be in that moment. "I will not let you manipulate me again, Victoria," I said. Her eyes narrowed, and she tried to act like I didn't understand what was at stake. She threw numbers at me, warnings about how the FBI could come after me too, how I could lose everything if I didn't play along. But I didn't bend. I wasn't going to let her use fear to control me anymore. I had lived too long in the shadows of other people's power, first Robert's, then hers, and I was done. She glared at me, almost shaking with frustration, because for once she couldn't get me to fold. I felt the anger burning inside, but beneath it, there was something else, something steady. This was my chance to finally take control, to face the truth head-on instead of letting others decide my fate. That night, I called Claire, the investigator. I told her everything that had happened, every detail of what Victoria had said, and every threat hanging over me. She listened carefully, then told me what I already knew deep down. I couldn't run from this. I had to take it to the authorities myself before Victoria twisted the story in her favor. We talked late into the night, laying out the steps. She promised to gather the evidence she had, to organize it in a way the federal agents would take seriously. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't drowning. Yes, the truth about Robert was devastating. Yes, the money was tainted, but I wasn't powerless anymore. I could face this, not as a victim, but as someone finally in control of her own choices. I thought about what it meant to lose almost everything. $5 million sounded like a lot, but compared to the fortune Robert left, it was nothing. Still, I realized that wasn't the point anymore. What mattered was whether I let myself be pushed into another trap, whether I gave Victoria and Kevin the satisfaction of using me again. If I accepted their deal, I'd be repeating the same pattern, giving up my voice so they could have the upper hand. I wasn't going to live like that anymore. Even if it meant risking the inheritance, even if it meant starting over, I wanted to do it with honesty. I wanted to live in a way that didn't tie me to Robert's crimes or Victoria's schemes. For the first time, I felt clear about what I needed to do. The next morning, I made my decision. I called Claire again and told her to set up a meeting with the FBI. If there was going to be testimony, it would come from me, not from Victoria twisting the truth. I wanted the investigators to hear my side, to see the evidence straight from my hands, not secondhand through people who only wanted to save themselves. As I ended the call, I felt nervous, but also stronger than I had in years. I wasn't going to wait for others to decide my fate anymore. This was my fight now. I looked around the house, the same house that had once felt like a cage, and I whispered to myself, "I'm ready." For the first time in a long time, I believed it. And with that, I began preparing to face the FBI directly, determined to finally take control of my life. When the day of the meeting with the FBI arrived, I felt my stomach tighten like I hadn't felt since Robert's funeral. I sat in the waiting room of their office, clutching my purse in my lap, rehearsing in my head what I would say. When the agent finally called my name, I stood up and followed her down a hallway into a plain office. She introduced herself politely, but didn't waste time. She asked me to start from the beginning, and that's exactly what I did. I told her everything: how Victoria lied about the will, how she threw me out, how Kevin pushed the nursing home idea, and how they both manipulated me. Then I went further. I told her about Eleanor's visit, about Robert's hidden files, about the money that had been laundered for years. Every word was heavy, but I said them anyway. The agent took notes, nodded often, and asked precise questions. Unlike Victoria, who thought she could control the story, I decided to cooperate fully. I didn't want secrets. I didn't want deals that left me weak again. If I was going to survive this, it would be through honesty, not manipulation. The agents listened carefully, and when I finished, they looked at each other, clearly impressed with how much I had laid out. They told me that my testimony could make me a key witness. They explained that what Victoria and Kevin had tried to do, blackmailing me with Robert's crimes while offering deals with the FBI, was itself a crime, extortion and conspiracy. Then they asked me something that made my heart race. They wanted me to wear a wire, to record a conversation with Victoria and Kevin in my own house. The thought scared me. I wasn't used to things like that, and the idea of sitting across from my daughter while secretly recording her felt impossible. But then I remembered how many times they had lied to me, hurt me, used me like I was nothing. If this was the way to stop them once and for all, then I had to do it. I agreed. The agent placed a small device in my hand and explained how it worked. I nodded, swallowing hard, telling myself I was ready. That night, I prepared my house like nothing unusual was happening. I placed the wire exactly where the agent told me, under my blouse, the tiny microphone hidden and ready. My hands shook as I moved through the rooms, adjusting pillows and setting glasses of water on the table, like it was just another visit. When Victoria and Kevin arrived, I forced myself to greet them calmly, even though my chest felt like it might explode. Kevin did most of the talking at first, his voice low and serious. He leaned in and said, "We can make this go away, Margaret. You don't want the FBI on you. Just back us up, and everything will stay quiet." Victoria added her piece, trying to sound gentle. "Mom, you don't understand how deep this goes. If you fight us, you'll lose everything. Help us, and we'll help you." Their words made my skin crawl, but I nodded along, pretending to listen, while inside I was counting the minutes, praying the agents outside could hear every word. The conversation went on for nearly an hour. They talked about deals, about how we could present a united front, about keeping Robert's secrets buried. They promised me safety if I stood with them, and they threatened me with ruin if I didn't. Every sentence was another piece of evidence. My heart pounded in my ears, but I kept my face steady. I asked small questions, just like the FBI told me to, pushing them to reveal more. At one point, Kevin even admitted that they had faked documents about the will, laughing bitterly about how close they came to getting away with it. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I just sat there, hands folded, waiting. Finally, when Victoria leaned forward and said, "Mom, if you don't side with us, we'll make sure you go down with Dad," I knew we had enough. It was cruel, but it was also exactly what the agents needed to hear. Then it happened. The door burst open, and the FBI agents came rushing in. Victoria jumped up, her face pale with shock. Kevin cursed under his breath, trying to stand tall, but it was useless. The agents moved quickly, ordering them both to sit and putting them in handcuffs. Victoria looked at me with wide eyes, her mouth open like she couldn't believe what was happening. She shouted, "Mom, how could you do this?" But I didn't answer. I sat quietly, my heart still racing, watching as they were led out of the house. The charges were clear: conspiracy, fraud, and extortion. Everything they had built their lives on was crumbling in front of them, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. For once, I wasn't the powerless one. I was the one who had turned the tables. When the house grew quiet again, I let out the breath I had been holding the whole time. My body felt heavy, but my mind was sharp. It was over. After months of being lied to, betrayed, and pushed aside, I had finally taken control. The FBI agents thanked me for my courage, telling me that the recording would be the final piece to ensure Victoria and Kevin couldn't escape justice this time. I nodded, barely able to speak, but inside I felt something new. It wasn't joy exactly, but it was a sense of victory, of finally standing up for myself in a way I never thought possible. Victoria and Kevin had tried to break me, but in the end, I was the one who defeated them, with intelligence, with courage, and with a strength I had never known I had. And as I closed the door that night, I knew one thing for certain: the revenge was complete. When the trials were finally over, I thought I had heard the last of shocking revelations. But then the FBI called me in again, this time to explain something I never expected. They sat me down in a quiet office and told me the truth about Robert. For years, I had believed he was laundering money for criminals. I had mourned him, hated him, and questioned everything about our life together. But the truth was different. He wasn't just part of the scheme. He was working as an informant. He had been cooperating with the FBI for more than a decade, infiltrating the very organizations I thought he was supporting. The documents Claire and I had found hadn't been the whole picture. They explained that Robert's accounts and companies were used as part of controlled investigations. Every dollar he left me was legitimate, cleared through years of oversight and cooperation with the federal government. I sat there stunned, tears welling up in my eyes. The man I had doubted so deeply, the husband I thought had betrayed me, had actually been risking his life to protect others. For the first time since his death, I felt both proud and relieved. He hadn't abandoned me after all. Walking back into my house that day felt different than ever before. The weight of suspicion was gone. I didn't see the furniture or walls as reminders of lies anymore. I saw them as symbols of survival, of both Robert's and mine. That's when I decided it was time to give the house a new life, just as I was giving myself one. I hired contractors and told them I wanted big changes. The kitchen was redone with bright colors I loved, not ones Robert had chosen. Victoria's old room, once untouched, became my art studio. The living room, where so many painful memories had taken place, was opened up, filled with light and warmth. As the renovations went on, I felt myself changing too. I wasn't preserving a museum of Robert's life anymore. I was building my own home, one that reflected me. I didn't ask anyone's opinion. I didn't wait for permission. For the first time, every choice was mine, and each new wall painted, each piece of furniture moved, reminded me I was finally living for myself. But I didn't want to stop there. With Harrison's help, I started planning something bigger. I used part of my inheritance to open a foundation for protecting older people from financial abuse. I thought of all the times I had been manipulated and silenced, and I wanted to make sure others had a voice. The foundation offered free legal advice, hotlines for victims, and educational programs to warn families about exploitation. It started small, but within months, people from all over the state were reaching out. Reporters began calling again, but this time I welcomed them. I wanted the story told, not just mine, but the story of anyone who had been taken advantage of. I gave interviews, I stood on stages, I even met with senators who were interested in pushing new laws to protect seniors. The foundation became my mission, something that gave all my pain meaning. And when a production company approached me about making a documentary series on my story, I agreed. Not for fame, but because I wanted the truth shared, so no one else would suffer in silence like I once did. Meanwhile, Victoria and Kevin faced their sentences. The courtroom was packed on the final day, and I sat quietly as the judge read out the years they would serve. Kevin barely looked up, but Victoria glanced at me once, her eyes filled with bitterness and regret. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just sat there steady, knowing justice was being done. They had chosen their path, and now they were living with the consequences. It wasn't revenge that made me feel at peace. It was closure. For so long, I had lived under their control, afraid of their words, afraid of losing everything. But now, the roles had reversed. They were the ones locked away, and I was free. Free to live, free to rebuild, free to define myself without fear. It didn't erase the pain, but it allowed me to let go of it. When I walked out of that courthouse, I felt lighter than I had in years. In that freedom, I started reconnecting with parts of myself I had lost. I returned to painting, something I hadn't done since I was a young woman. I set up canvases in my new studio, covering them in colors that expressed what I felt inside. Sometimes it was anger, sometimes joy, sometimes peace, but always, it was mine. The hours spent with a brush in my hand felt like therapy, like reclaiming pieces of my soul I had forgotten existed. I also traveled for the first time on my own, visiting places I had always dreamed about, but never dared to go while Robert was alive. I walked through art museums in Europe, attended workshops, and even made new friends who had no idea about my past until I chose to tell them. Little by little, I built a life that was fully mine, without needing to justify it to anyone. Looking back now, I see the full journey. I was once the quiet, invisible wife, pushed aside by a husband's shadow and a daughter's cruelty. I was discarded, called useless, treated like I had no worth. But that woman no longer exists. I am independent. I am strong. I am the one who turned betrayal into justice, silence into voice, and pain into purpose. The world may remember me through the foundation or through the documentary that tells my story, but I don't need that recognition. What matters most is how I see myself. I am no longer just Robert's wife or Victoria's mother. I am Margaret Sullivan, the woman who refused to stay broken, who fought back, and who built a new life from the ruins. And in that truth, I finally found peace. Finally, we've reached the end of this story. I'm extremely happy that you've made it this far. Thank you very much for watching. Comment below what you thought and what was the best or worst part. Don't forget to subscribe. Until next time.